Hey guys, tonight we're going to sink into the plush cushions of history, drifting back to a time when the world moved at the pace of a gently simmering kettle. Imagine the low glow of oil lamps, the faint scent of charcoal, and the quiet clink of porcelain as you settle in. We're journeying to ancient Persia, a land where the rustle of silk robes was often accompanied by the subtle gurgle of water heating for the day's first brew. You'll be so incredibly bored by the intricate details of tea preparation that you probably won't survive this episode awake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not in Persia itself, but far to the east, in the verdant, mist-shrouded mountains of what we now call China. This is where tea, Camellia sinensis, first began its long, slow journey across continents and centuries. For millennia, tea was a closely guarded secret, a medicinal elixir, or a meditative aid, known only to a select few in its native lands. You can almost feel the hush of those ancient Chinese monasteries, where monks cultivated tea not for profit, but for spiritual clarity. Its subtle bitterness a counterpoint to the sweetness of enlightenment. It was a drink of emperors and hermits, a symbol of refinement and inner peace, long before it became the ubiquitous brew we know today. Think of it as the original craft beverage, painstakingly cultivated and deeply revered, centuries before anyone even dreamed of a pumpkin spice latte. The exact moment tea first stepped onto the global stage is a bit murky, lost in the swirling mists of legend and scanty records. We know it traveled along routes that would later become part of the famed Silk Road, carried by hardy traders who valued its compact, dried form for its restorative properties on long, arduous journeys. Imagine a caravan trudging through the scorching deserts, dust clinging to every surface, and then, at a precious oasis, the discovery of a small package of dried leaves that, when steeped, could offer a moment of refreshing clarity amidst the relentless heat and monotony. It was practical, yes, but also a tiny luxury, a sliver of civilization in the wild expanse. Historians still argue whether tea's initial spread was driven by deliberate trade or simply by curious travelers sharing their peculiar rituals. Was it savvy marketing from ancient Chinese merchants? Or just a really good word-of-mouth campaign that took a few centuries to pay off? One mainstream historical fact we can cling to is that tea's journey to the West, including Persia, was inextricably linked to the burgeoning trade networks that connected East and West. These routes weren't just for exotic silks and precious jewels. They were conduits for ideas, technologies, and, yes, even humble dried leaves. As goods moved, so did culture. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the slow seep of dye into fabric. It wasn't a sudden explosion of tea houses, but a gradual, almost shy Picture it a merchant, exhausted from weeks on the road, accepts a strange, dark brew from a fellow traveler. He sips it hesitantly, and then, perhaps, feels a quiet calm settle over him. It's not an immediate epiphany, but a subtle shift, a recognition of something new and unexpectedly comforting. A quirky tidbit that often gets overlooked is how some early traders might have actually stumbled upon tea by accident, perhaps confusing it with some other herb or spice. Can you imagine the look on their faces when they realized this wasn't just another medicinal root, but something entirely different, something that could be steeped and savored? It's a bit like someone accidentally discovering that coffee beans, when roasted and ground, become a delightful beverage, instead of just a strange, bitter fruit. The world is full of happy accidents, and tea's global dominance might very well be one of them. You can practically hear the ancient Persian merchants, after a long day of haggling over silks and spices, being offered a cup of this strange, dark brew by a fellow traveler from the East. Their initial skepticism, perhaps, slowly giving way to a quiet, contemplative sip. The journey of tea was not a sprint, but a meandering, purposeful stroll across the vast tapestry of ancient lands. The expansion of the Persian Empire itself, stretching its influence and trade routes, inadvertently created fertile ground for tea's arrival. As Persian caravanserai dotted the landscape, offering respite to travelers and merchants, they became natural points of cultural exchange. It's in these bustling, cosmopolitan hubs that the first tentative sips of tea would have been taken by Persian citizens. They were curious, resourceful people, always open to new flavors and experiences, especially those that promised comfort or a touch of the exotic. You can imagine the murmurs of curiosity, the raised eyebrows, and then the slow nod of approval as the unique aroma filled the air. It wasn't an overnight sensation like a new pop song, but more like a classical piece that slowly wins you over with its depth and nuance. Moreover, the Persian affinity for hospitality and communal gathering meant that any new beverage with social potential would eventually find its place. Tea, with its inherently communal nature, the shared pot. The pouring of cups for guests would have resonated deeply with existing Persian customs. While initially an exotic import, its gentle warmth and subtle stimulation were perfectly suited to the long, contemplative evenings that were so much a part of Persian life. It offered a moment of pause, a chance to gather thoughts, or simply to enjoy the company of others without the heavy effects of stronger drinks. This cultural compatibility, though perhaps not immediately apparent, was a crucial factor in tea's slow but steady integration into Persian society. It truly felt like it belonged there, like a puzzle piece quietly slipping into place. As those early tea leaves traversed the Silk Road, they weren't simply commodities. They were tiny ambassadors carrying whispers of distant cultures. Imagine the merchant, perhaps a Sogdian, his face weathered by sun and sand, unrolling a precious bolt of silk in a bustling Persian caravanserai. Beside it, almost as an afterthought, sits a small, tightly packed brick of dried tea. It wouldn't have been an instant hit, not like gold or spices. No. Tea's adoption in Persia was a slow burn, a gradual seduction rather than a fiery romance. It was like trying to convince someone to switch from their beloved strong coffee to a delicate green tea today. It takes time, curiosity, and perhaps a gentle nudge from an adventurous friend. The Silk Road, that intricate web of trade routes connecting East and West for centuries, was the true unsung hero of tea's journey. It wasn't a single paved road, but a dynamic network of paths, deserts, mountains, and seas. Traders, often risking their lives against bandits and harsh elements, carried everything from spices to ceramics, and eventually, tea. You can almost hear the creak of the camel saddles, the distant jingle of bells, as these convoys snaked through the stark beauty of the Central Asian landscape. For the weary traveler, the ability to brew a warm, comforting drink from these dried leaves after a day of relentless travel must have felt like a small miracle, a moment of reprieve and warmth in an otherwise indifferent world. This gradual exposure, cup by careful cup, was how tea began to lay down roots in Persian soil. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Silk Road was instrumental not just for goods, but for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and even religions. Buddhism, for example, traveled along these very same routes from India to China. So, it's not surprising that a beverage so deeply intertwined with culture and ritual in its homeland would also find its way across these ancient arteries of global connection. The Persians, ever open to new influences and innovations, would have encountered tea initially through these interactions, perhaps at busy trading posts where different languages and customs mingled. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that tea was initially mistaken by some Persians for a medicinal herb, perhaps even a somewhat bitter-tasting one. Imagine a physician, after much deliberation, prescribing boiled leaf water for a common ailment, rather than as a delightful beverage to be savored. It's easy to see how something so foreign could be misinterpreted, especially when its true purpose and preparation methods were not yet fully understood. It probably wasn't served in elegant porcelain cups at first, but perhaps in humble earthenware, alongside other herbal remedies. This initial functional role highlights just how alien tea must have seemed before its true potential as a social lubricant and source of quiet pleasure was realized. Historians still argue whether tea's primary initial appeal in Persia was its perceived medicinal qualities or its purely practical benefit as a hot, clean beverage in regions where water quality could be questionable. Was it a cure-all, or simply a safer alternative to untreated water, spiced perhaps to mask any lingering unpleasantness? It's a chicken or egg scenario that probably has no definitive answer, but it certainly speaks to tea's versatile early life in a new land. Regardless, the seed was planted, and slowly, gently, the habit began to take root. You're trudging along that ancient path, the sun beating down, and the promise of a warm, perhaps even invigorating. Brew at the end of the day becomes a tiny beacon, pulling you forward, the sound of water boiling, the quiet rustle of leaves in the pot. These small comforts were slowly but surely making their way into the lives of Persians, one caravan at a time. The very concept of chai, as it would come to be known, was a slow-motion cultural adoption, like waiting for a particularly stubborn jam jar to open. You wiggle it a bit, apply some steady pressure, and eventually, pop. It's open, and a new flavor enters the world. The early exposure wouldn't have been widespread. Mind you, think of it more as a trickle than a flood. Perhaps a wealthy merchant returning from a long trip, curious about the strange customs he'd observed, would bring back a small amount of tea as a novelty. Or a scholar, fascinated by the exotic lore surrounding this new brew, might seek it out. It was exclusive, rare, and therefore, perhaps, even more intriguing. This exclusivity, ironically, likely fueled its eventual broader appeal. People always want what they can't easily have, don't they? It's the same psychological principle that makes limited edition sneakers so desirable. Only with ancient leaves instead of modern footwear. And so, the groundwork for a deep and lasting love affair with tea was quietly, subtly laid, leaf by leaf, journey by arduous journey, across the vast and ancient Silk Road. With tea's subtle introduction via the Silk Road, we arrive at the pivotal moment of its first real sips by Persian elites. Imagine, if you will, a grand reception within the opulent walls of an Achaemenid palace, or perhaps a more intimate gathering in a wealthy merchant's courtyard in ancient Persepolis. The air is thick with the scent of jasmine and rosewater, the soft murmur of conversation punctuated by the plucking of a tar. And then, something new is offered. Not wine, not sherbet, but a dark, steaming liquid in delicate cups, brought by a curious traveler, or perhaps gifted by an envoy from the distant east. At this stage, tea was undeniably an exotic novelty, a status symbol rather than a staple. It was something whispered about, presented with a flourish, and likely consumed with a mixture of curiosity and a touch of suspicion. You weren't reaching for it after a long day of farming. You were probably a court official or a learned scholar, someone with the leisure and means to experiment with new pleasures. The initial adoption would have been highly localized, confined to the upper echelons of society, those who had access to rare imports and were culturally inclined to embrace new trends. Think of it like the first people in Europe to try chocolate or coffee. It was expensive, rare, and exclusive. You probably wouldn't find it in your local market stall. A mainstream historical fact is that the Persian Empire, throughout its various dynasties, was renowned for its sophisticated court culture and its appreciation for fine arts, luxury goods, and intellectual pursuits. This environment was ripe for the reception of something as refined and complex as tea. The very act of preparing and consuming tea, with its inherent ritual and focus, would have appealed to a culture that valued contemplation and aesthetic pleasure. It wasn't just a drink, it was an experience, a miniature ceremony that could be performed with elegance. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some early Persian encounters with tea might have involved brewing it with an array of spices already familiar to them, perhaps even for fully understanding the tea's own delicate nuances. Imagine a chef, accustomed to bold flavors, throwing in cinnamon, saffron, and cloves, trying to improve this strange, somewhat plain-tasting foreign leaf. The result might have been quite different from the pure, unadulterated tea favored in China, creating a uniquely Persian interpretation from the very beginning. It's a bit like someone getting their hands on a new gadget and immediately trying to modify it with all the accessories they already own, sometimes for better, sometimes for hilariously worse. These early experiments, however, laid the groundwork for the rich and diverse tea culture that would eventually flourish in Persia. Historians still argue whether the initial appeal of tea among Persian elites was primarily its exoticism, its perceived health benefits, or simply its potential as a sophisticated social lubricant. Was it a novelty to impress guests, a secret potion for vitality, or a subtle way to extend conversations? Perhaps it was a combination of all three, with each aspect appealing to different facets of the Persian aristocratic lifestyle. You can almost picture a grand vizier stroking his beard thoughtfully as he sips this dark brew, pondering not just its taste, but its implications for future diplomatic exchanges or even its potential as a new source of revenue. The early role of tea was likely confined to specific ceremonial or social occasions. It might have been served during philosophical discussions, poetic recitations, or intimate gatherings among close confidants. It wasn't a thirst quencher after a long trek, but a deliberate act, a conscious choice to engage with something novel and refined. This initial rarefied status meant that the methods of preparation would have been precise, perhaps even secretive, guarded by the household staff who understood the nuances of brewing this precious import. The act of offering tea would have been a mark of respect, a gesture of hospitality that carried weight. You weren't just serving a drink, you were offering a piece of the world, a glimpse into distant lands. As this trend slowly diffused downwards, from the absolute pinnacle of society to the slightly less exalted, tea began its quiet march towards wider acceptance. The taste for it would have been acquired, cultivated over time, much like a connoisseur develops an appreciation for a rare wine. It wasn't about instant gratification. It was about the subtle unfolding of flavor, the quiet warmth, and the gentle, almost imperceptible lift it provided. The Persian palate, already sophisticated and accustomed to nuanced flavors from spices and fruits, was uniquely positioned to appreciate tea's complexities. It was the perfect complement to their already rich culinary landscape, a new note in a symphony of tastes. The story of Persian tea, then, begins not with a bang, but with a quiet, contemplative sip in the luxurious chambers of the elite. Having explored the birth of the chai khane, We now turn our attention to the heart of the matter. The subtle rituals of preparation that transformed humble tea leaves into a soul-calming elixir in ancient Persia. This wasn't merely about boiling water and dunking a tea bag. No. This was an art form, a dance of precision and patience, steeped in centuries of tradition. You can almost hear the gentle murmur of the water, feel the warmth radiating from the copper kettle, and smell the delicate fragrance of the leaves as they unfurl. The centerpiece of any serious Persian tea preparation was often the samovar, a magnificent metal urn, typically copper or brass, with a spigot for dispensing hot water. While its origins might be debated, its ubiquity in Persia became undeniable. Imagine this gleaming vessel, often intricately engraved, sitting majestically on a low table, perpetually humming with heat. Below, coals would glow, keeping the water at a constant, perfect temperature. Above, a smaller teapot, often ceramic, would perch, holding the concentrated tea brew. This two-tiered system allowed for perfect control, highly concentrated tea in the pot, and boiling water in the samovar, ready to be mixed to individual preference. It was a sophisticated piece of technology for its time, far beyond a simple stovetop kettle, and it spoke volumes about the importance placed on tea. A mainstream historical fact here is that the samovar, while not exclusively Persian, became deeply ingrained in Persian tea culture, almost to the point of being a national symbol. Its presence signified hospitality, warmth, and the readiness to welcome guests with a refreshing cup. The act of preparing tea with a samovar wasn't just functional. It was a performance, a silent invitation to linger and connect. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the highly concentrated tea in the smaller teapot was called golrang, or flower color, a testament to its rich hue. Patrons in a chai khane, or guests in a home, would be given a small amount of this golrang in their glass, then dilute it to their desired strength with hot water from the samovar. This individualized approach meant everyone could have their tea exactly as they liked it, from a deep, almost inky brew to a light, golden infusion. It was the ultimate customizable beverage long before coffee shops even dreamed of elaborate menus. It also subtly shifted control to the drinker, making them an active participant in their own tea experience. Historians still argue whether the Persian preference for strong, concentrated tea diluted with hot water emerged from a desire for efficiency, a particular taste profile, or perhaps even as a way to conserve precious tea leaves in earlier times. Was it a practical choice, an aesthetic one, or born out of necessity? Whatever the reason, this method became the hallmark of Persian tea service. Distinct from many other tea-drinking cultures, you're not just pouring a cup, you're crafting it, blending the dark essence with the clear water, watching the color deepen as you stir. The actual brewing process itself was a ritual of precision. High-quality black tea, often Ceylon or Indian varieties, was preferred. The leaves would be carefully placed in the teapot, and a small amount of freshly boiled water would be poured over them to wake up the leaves. a preliminary rinse to remove any dust and encourage them to unfurl. This water was usually discarded. Then, the main portion of boiling water would be added, and the teapot placed atop the samovar to gently steep and keep warm. This slow, gentle infusion, often lasting for 10 to 20 minutes, allowed the tea's full flavor and aroma to develop without becoming bitter. Patience, it seems, was a key ingredient in every perfect cup of Persian tea. The final pour involved not just the tea, but also the proper vessel. Persian tea is almost exclusively served in small successive, clear glass cups, often bell-shaped or pear-shaped, without handles. This choice was deliberate. The clear glass allowed the drinker to appreciate the tea's rich, inviting color, ranging from a pale amber to a deep ruby red. The lack of a handle forced you to cradle the warm glass in your hands, providing a comforting, tactile connection to the beverage. You would often hold it by the rim, careful not to burn your fingers. A small act of mindful engagement with each sip. It forces a certain slowness, a deliberate appreciation that a mug with a handle just doesn't quite convey. This meticulous process, from the glowing coals of the samovar to the delicate glass in hand, was more than just making a drink. It was a meditation, a pause in the day's rush, a subtle invitation to quiet the mind and savor the moment. You watch the steam rise. You inhale the comforting aroma. You feel the warmth seep into your fingers. It's a testament to how even the simplest of acts, when approached with intention and tradition, can become profoundly calming. The Persian tea ritual isn't about speed or efficiency. It's about the deliberate, unhurried unfolding of pleasure, one gentle sip at a time. From the meticulous preparation, we glide seamlessly into the world of teacups and etiquette, an equally vital component of the subtle rituals of Persian tea drinking. It wasn't enough to simply brew a perfect cup. How it was served, and how it was received, spoke volumes about respect, hospitality, and social grace. You are now a guest in a traditional Persian home, or perhaps seated comfortably in a chai-khane, observing the nuanced dance of hands and glances that accompanies each pour. As we touched upon, Persian tea is almost invariably served in small, clear glass cups, often called estakan. These aren't your hefty ceramic mugs. They are delicate, often bell-shaped or pear-shaped, and conspicuously lack handles. This seemingly minor detail is, in fact, profoundly significant. The clear glass allows you to appreciate the visual beauty of the tea, its rich amber or ruby hue shimmering in the light. But the lack of a handle forces a direct, tactile connection with the warmth of the beverage. You cradle the glass, carefully holding it by the rim to avoid burning your fingers. A small act of mindful engagement with each sip. It's a subtle invitation to slow down, to feel the heat, to be present in the moment. Trying to rush through your tea with one of these glasses would be like trying to run a marathon in flip-flops possible, but certainly not ideal. A mainstream historical fact is that the use of small, Handleless glasses for hot beverages is common across many cultures that adopted tea from the East, reflecting a shared aesthetic and practical approach to tea consumption. The preference for glass over porcelain, while perhaps partly due to availability, also speaks to a desire to showcase the tea itself, rather than the vessel. It's about the liquid poetry within, not just the ornate frame. Now, for a quirky tidbit to prevent scorched fingers from the hot glass, a small saucer, often called a nalbeki, was used not just for catching drips, but sometimes even as an alternative drinking vessel. Some people would pour their tea from the estakon into the wider, shallower nalbeki to cool it faster, then sip from the saucer itself. Imagine seeing someone doing that today in a modern coffee shop. You'd probably do a double take. This practice, while less common now, highlights the ingenuity and adaptability within the tea drinking tradition, finding practical solutions while maintaining the core ritual. It also adds a layer of relaxed informality to the consumption, a subtle nod to comfort over rigid formality. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of glass estakon was purely an aesthetic choice, a practical response to the availability of glass, or a cultural preference for seeing the tea's color. Was it about beauty, utility, or tradition? It's likely a blend of all three, with each factor contributing to the enduring popularity of this particular vessel. The material, the shape, the method of holding. Every element plays a part in the overall experience. Beyond the vessel, the etiquette of serving and receiving tea was, and largely still is, a cornerstone of Persian hospitality. When you are offered tea in a Persian home, or chai khane, it is considered impolite to refuse. Even if you've had countless cups, a polite sip, or at least accepting the cup, is a sign of respect. The host, or chai chi in a tea house, would typically offer endless refills. It is customary to indicate you've had enough by placing your estakon upside down on its saucer, or by gently shaking it. This silent communication avoids any awkwardness and ensures you're not perpetually topped up. It's a subtle ballet of gestures, a conversation without words. The act of sharing tea is deeply communal. When pouring, the host would often make sure to offer tea to everyone present, starting with the eldest or most esteemed guest. The flow of conversation would often pause, or soften, as fresh tea was poured, allowing for a moment of shared quietude. Sugar, often in the form of a rock candy stick, nabat or sugar cubes, would be served alongside the tea. Instead of stirring the sugar into the tea, it is common practice to place a piece of kand between your teeth and let the tea wash over it, slowly dissolving the sweetness directly onto your palate. This creates a delightful interplay of bitter and sweet, a tiny explosion of flavor with each sip, rather than a uniformly sweetened beverage. It's a very active way to sweeten your tea, almost like a mini performance with every single sip. This intricate dance of serving and sipping, of offering and accepting, reinforces the social bonds and the inherent generosity within Persian culture. Tea isn't just a drink, it's a medium for connection, a catalyst for conversation, and a silent language of respect. It encourages lingering, fosters quiet contemplation, and ultimately calms the soul. You're not just consuming a beverage, you're participating in a timeless ritual, a gentle current flowing through generations of Persian hospitality. One delicate, handleless glass at a time. The sound of the spoon gently clinking against the saucer as someone stirs. The soft sigh of contentment after a warm sip. These are the tiny orchestras of peace playing out in every chai khane. Having immersed ourselves in the intricate dance of tea preparation and the subtle etiquette of its consumption, we now explore how tea transcended mere beverage status to become deeply interwoven with the vibrant tapestry of Persian literature, music, and art. Imagine the soft glow of a lantern illuminating a manuscript, a poet's quill poised over parchment, or the gentle strumming of a sitar in a dimly lit room, and almost certainly a warm glass of tea nearby, acting as both muse and companion. Persia has long been celebrated for its profound poetic tradition, a heritage that boasts luminaries like Rumi, Hafiz, and Sayadi. It's no mere coincidence that the quiet contemplation often inspired by tea found a natural resonance with the introspective and often spiritual themes of Persian poetry. The act of sipping tea, allowing its warmth and subtle flavors to wash over the palate, parallels the way a beautiful verse unfolds, revealing layers of meaning with each reading. You can almost picture Hafiz, perhaps after a particularly vigorous creative session, pausing to refresh his spirit with a cup of tea, letting the gentle steam clear his mind for the next rhyme. A mainstream historical fact is that Persian poetry, particularly mystical and lyrical forms, often employs metaphors drawn from daily life, nature, and the senses to convey deeper truths. Tea, as it became an increasingly integral part of daily life, naturally found its way into this rich metaphorical language. It might symbolize warmth, companionship, clarity of thought, or even the bitter sweetness of life itself. The subtle ritual of tea, therefore, became a powerful symbol, effortlessly integrated into the profound expressions of the soul. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some poets, it's rumored, believed that tea not only stimulated their minds, but also calmed their restless spirits, allowing them to achieve a state of heightened creativity. There are anecdotes of poets requesting specific blends or brewing methods, convinced that a particular tea held the key to unlocking their next masterpiece. It's a bit like a modern writer insisting on a specific brand of coffee or a certain type of background music to get into their zone. This personal, almost superstitious, connection highlights how deeply tea penetrated the creative psyche of Persian artists. You can just picture a poet struggling with a difficult stanza, taking a contemplative sip, and, aha, the perfect word arrives. Historians still argue whether tea's integration into Persian artistic expression was a conscious choice by artists seeking inspiration, a reflection of its ubiquitous presence, or simply an accidental byproduct of cultural exchange. Was it a deliberate artistic tool, an unconscious cultural adoption, or a confluence of both, whatever the precise mechanism. Tea undeniably became a quiet, constant presence in the background, and often the foreground, of Persian artistic endeavors. In music, too, the gentle rhythm of tea consumption often mirrored the slow, unfolding melodies of traditional Persian classical music. Performances in chai khanes, as we've discussed, were common. Imagine a master musician, his fingers dancing across the strings of a santur or tar, pausing between pieces to accept a freshly poured glass of tea. The soothing warmth would offer a moment of respite, a transition between melodic phrases, allowing both performer and audience to reset their senses. The hushed clink of the estekan, the soft intake of breath as the tea is sipped, became almost part of the ambient soundscape of these musical gatherings, a subtle percussion section to the main performance. Visually, tea and its accoutrements frequently appeared in Persian miniature paintings and illustrations, especially those depicting scenes of leisure, hospitality, and courtly life. A finely depicted samovar, a delicate estekan, or figures gathered around a tea spread would convey a sense of refinement, tranquility, and cultural richness. These depictions weren't merely decorative, they served as visual affirmations of tea's importance, cementing its place in the collective consciousness and aesthetic ideals. You'd see elegant ladies and gentlemen, often engaged in polite conversation, with a ubiquitous tea setup nearby, a silent testament to its presence. It's like seeing a smartphone in every modern painting of daily life. It just belongs. The concept of hal-adel, a state of inner peace and spiritual well-being, is deeply cherished in Persian culture. Tea, with its calming properties and the rituals surrounding its consumption, became an accessible pathway to achieving this state. It was a simple, yet profound, tool for reflection, for quietude, and for nurturing the soul. For artists, this introspective quality was invaluable, providing the mental space needed for creativity to flourish. It allowed them to momentarily detach from the clamor of the outside world and tune into the subtle whispers of their inner muse. The gentle warmth, the aromatic steam, the slow sip, each element contributing to a quiet alchemy of peace, an artistic meditation in liquid form. As tea firmly established its place in Persian homes and chai khanes, it naturally began to evolve, adapting to local tastes and available resources. This brings us to the fascinating role of spices and sweeteners, which transformed the basic brew into the myriad regional variations still enjoyed today. You can almost taste the subtle warmth of cardamom, the delicate floral notes of rosewater, or the earthy richness of saffron, each an addition that tells a story of Persian ingenuity and palate. While the core of Persian tea remained the strong black brew. The genius lay in the customary additions that elevated it beyond a simple infusion. These weren't just random sprinklings. They were carefully chosen complements that enhanced the tea's character while reflecting the aromatic richness of Persian cuisine itself. Imagine sitting down to a cup, and instead of just plain sugar, you're presented with an array of choices, each promising a slightly different, equally delightful experience. This customization was, and remains, a cornerstone of the Persian tea ritual. A mainstream historical fact is that Persia, situated at the crossroads of ancient trade routes, has always had access to a vast array of exotic spices. Long before tea arrived, Persian cooks and confectioners were masters of blending spices like saffron, cardamom, cinnamon, and ginger into their dishes and sweets. It was only natural, therefore, that these familiar and beloved flavors would find their way into the newly adopted beverage, creating a distinctly Persian chai. Now, for a quirky tidbit, one of the most beloved additions, cardamom heel, was often subtly crushed just before being added to the teapot, or even placed whole into the estacon itself. The gentle warmth of the tea would then slowly coax out the spice's aromatic oils, releasing its distinctive, slightly citrusy and floral notes. This wasn't about overpowering the tea, but rather adding a nuanced layer of fragrance and warmth. It's a bit like adding a single, perfect zest of lemon to a dish. It brightens everything without stealing the show. The subtle burst of flavor as the tiny cardamom pod infuses is a quiet delight. Historians still argue whether the initial incorporation of spices into Persian tea was driven by a desire to mask the taste of early, perhaps lower quality teas, to enhance perceived medicinal benefits, or simply to align the new beverage with existing Persian culinary preferences for complex aromas. Was it a cover-up, a health tonic, or a flavor upgrade? The truth is likely a combination, showcasing how cultural integration often involves adaptation and innovation. Beyond cardamom, other additions were popular depending on the region and personal preference. Rosewater golab, distilled from fragrant rose petals, offered a delicate, almost ethereal floral note, transforming the tea into something truly special, often reserved for more special occasions or for those seeking a touch of elegance. In some areas, particularly in colder climates, a hint of cinnamon or even ginger might be added for extra warmth and a spicy kick, turning the tea into a comforting balm against the chill. And of course, the king of Persian spices, saffron, with its unmistakable golden hue and subtle honeyed aroma, occasionally made an appearance, elevating tea to a luxurious, almost regal drink. These weren't everyday additions for everyone, but they speak to the creative spirit within Persian tea culture. The choice of sweeteners also played a significant role. As previously mentioned, the use of rock candy nabat, or sugar cubes, and held in the mouth while sipping the tea, was and is a quintessential Persian method. This method allows for a controlled release of sweetness, preventing the tea from becoming cloyingly sweet and allowing the tea's own character to shine through. It creates a dynamic interplay between the tea's slight bitterness and the sugar's crystalline sweetness, a subtle tension that makes each sip interesting. You're not simply consuming a sweet drink. You're experiencing a delicate balance. Sometimes, especially for medicinal purposes or simply for a different flavor profile, honey might be stirred into the tea, adding its own unique complexity and perceived health benefits. The variety of options for sweetening meant that tea could be tailored not just to individual taste, but also to mood, occasion, or even perceived need. It underscores the personalized nature of the Persian tea ritual, where comfort and preference reign supreme. The evolution of these spiced and sweetened variations demonstrates the organic way in which a foreign custom can be wholly embraced and transformed by a new culture. Persian tea isn't just tea. It's a unique expression of Persian identity, steeped in centuries of culinary wisdom and a deep appreciation for aromatic delights. Each sip, infused with these thoughtful additions, is a testament to a tradition that understands the power of subtle flavors to calm the soul and delight the senses. You're not just drinking tea, you're tasting history, infused with the very essence of Persia. From the refined preferences of the elite to the aromatic variations that delighted every palate, we now witness the quiet but profound journey of tea as it transitioned from elite circles to every man's daily ritual. This wasn't a sudden revolution, but a gradual, organic integration, much like a gentle tide slowly covering the shore. You are no longer just an observer in a grand palace. You are now walking through the bustling bazaar, catching glimpses into humble homes, and seeing how tea became an indispensable part of Persian life for everyone, regardless of their social standing. Initially, tea's high cost and exotic nature restricted its enjoyment to the wealthy and those with privileged access to trade routes. But as supply increased, driven by growing demand and more efficient trade, the price inevitably began to fall. This economic shift was crucial. What was once a luxury item, perhaps a gift or a rare treat, slowly became something more attainable. Think of how personal computers or smartphones, once prohibitively expensive, eventually became commonplace. The same trajectory applied to tea in Persia, albeit over a much longer stretch of time. The very definition of luxury began to subtly shift, allowing more and more people to partake in this simple, profound pleasure. A mainstream historical fact that underpinned this democratization was the increasing stability and expansion of internal trade networks within the Persian Empire. As goods could be transported more easily and securely across the country, tea, initially concentrated in major cities that were hubs for international trade, began to spread to towns and villages in the interior. Caravans laden not just with silk and spices, but also with bundles of dried tea leaves, became a more common sight, effectively distributing the commodity far and wide. Now, for a quirky tidbit, one theory suggests that the proliferation of small itinerant tea vendors, who would set up temporary stalls in marketplaces or along dusty roadsides, played a significant role in introducing tea to the common person. These vendors, often with just a small samovar and a few estacans, offered an affordable cup to laborers, farmers, and travelers who might never have set foot in a grand chai khane. It was street food. But for your thirst, a quick and comforting pick-me-up that required no ceremony or formality. This accessibility, providing tea where people worked and traveled, effectively bypassed the elite establishments and brought the brew directly to the masses. It was the original grab-and-go culture, but with much more charm. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for tea's widespread adoption was its decreasing cost. The establishment of more public tea houses, or the innate human desire for a comforting, communal beverage. Was it purely economic, purely social, or an intrinsic human need? It's likely a complex interplay of all these factors, each reinforcing the other, creating a ripple effect across society. You can imagine a farmer, after a long day in the fields, stopping at one of these humble stalls, savoring a warm cup that soothes his tired muscles and offers a moment of quiet peace. The social acceptance of tea also played a vital role. As the elite embraced tea, it garnered a certain prestige. People tend to emulate those they look up to, and if tea was seen as sophisticated and refined, it naturally became desirable across social strata. Moreover, the inherent communal nature of tea drinking, the sharing of a pot, the conversations over steaming cups, resonated deeply with the collectivist ethos prevalent in Persian society. It was a perfect fit for family gatherings, neighborly visits, and informal social calls. Tea wasn't just a drink. It became a catalyst for human connection, a lubricant for social interactions at every level. For families, tea became the center of daily life. The morning ritual of brewing tea to wake up the household, the midday break for a refreshing cup, the evening gathering where tea accompanied stories and laughter. These became ingrained patterns. It offered a moment of pause, a chance to connect with loved ones, to discuss the day's events, or simply to enjoy each other's quiet company. The clinking of estacons and the bubbling of the samovar became the soundtrack of domestic tranquility, a comforting background hum to the rhythm of life. This widespread adoption also led to the development of regional variations and preferences in tea, as local ingredients and customs influenced the brew. While the strong black tea remained the base, the specific types of sugar, the common spices added, and even the way it was served might differ slightly from one province to another. This further cemented tea's place as a truly Persian beverage, not just an imported luxury, but something that had been adapted, personalized, and made uniquely their own. Leaf by humble leaf. You see, the subtle rituals weren't just for the rich. They were now accessible to all, providing a calming balm for every soul, a shared anchor in the ebb and flow of daily life. Having seen tea permeate every layer of Persian society, it's fascinating to observe how this humble brew ascended to the strategic heights of diplomacy and international relations. Tea wasn't just a social lubricant within Persia. It became a quiet, yet powerful, tool in the grand game of statecraft. Imagine ambassadors from rival empires, their faces carefully neutral, yet subtly relaxing as a steaming estacon of fragrant tea is placed before them. In the hushed rooms where destinies were decided, tea often played the role of a silent mediator, fostering an atmosphere conducive to negotiation and understanding. In the intricate world of ancient and classical diplomacy, where words were carefully weighed and gestures scrutinized, the offering of tea was a gesture of immense significance. It signified hospitality, respect, and a willingness to engage in peaceful discourse. Unlike stronger alcoholic beverages, which could sometimes cloud judgment or incite boisterous behavior, tea promoted sobriety, clarity of thought, and a calm demeanor. You wouldn't want your envoy signing away half your territory after too much wine. Would you, tea, offered a more measured approach, a gentle invitation to find common ground. A mainstream historical fact is that throughout history, diplomatic meetings across cultures have often involved elaborate rituals around food and drink, used to establish trust and create a favorable environment for negotiation. In the Persian context, tea seamlessly filled this role, providing a culturally resonant and universally appealing medium for opening lines of communication and softening potentially tense interactions. It allowed for a graceful entry into serious discussions, often preceding the actual talks with a shared moment of calm. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some historical accounts suggest that Persian diplomats, well aware of tea's calming properties, would deliberately serve multiple rounds of strong, sweet tea before entering difficult negotiations. The idea was that the gentle caffeine would sharpen minds, while the warmth and sweetness would subtly relax defenses and foster a sense of goodwill. It's a bit like modern negotiators strategically offering specific types of refreshments, hoping to subtly influence the mood of the room. You can almost see the Persian envoy, with a knowing glint in his eye, subtly nodding to the servant to refill a particularly stubborn ambassador's cup. Historians still argue whether tea's role in diplomacy was primarily symbolic, a practical aid to focus and calm, or a subtle display of Persian cultural sophistication and wealth. Was it simply a polite gesture, a natural stimulant, or a power play? It's likely a multifaceted influence, with each aspect contributing to its utility in the diplomatic arena. The very act of sharing tea could signify mutual respect, even between adversaries, creating a shared human experience that transcended political differences. Consider scenes described in historical texts, where foreign emissaries arriving at the Safavid court would be immediately offered tea upon their arrival. This wasn't just refreshment. It was a carefully choreographed welcoming ritual designed to disarm, to impress, and to establish the court's generosity and civility. The quality of the tea, the elegance of the serving vessels, and the grace of the attendants all contributed to the overall impression, setting a tone for the discussions to follow. It was a soft power tool, deployed with exquisite taste. Furthermore, tea became an integral part of the hospitality extended to foreign dignitaries during their stays. Long conversations, often spanning hours, would be punctuated by continuous refills of tea, creating a relaxed yet attentive atmosphere. This prolonged engagement over tea allowed for informal discussions, for building rapport, and for gauging the temperament of the other party outside the rigid confines of formal negotiations. It was in these seemingly casual moments, over a shared cup, that true connections or crucial insights might be gained. You're not just talking, you're building a relationship, one calm, measured sip at a time. The very act of sharing tea symbolized a common humanity, a recognition that despite political differences, there was a shared ground for civilized interaction. It served as a reminder that diplomacy, at its core, is about human beings interacting, and tea provided a gentle, non-threatening medium for that interaction. It helped to diffuse tension, to encourage patience, and to foster a sense of shared experience that could bridge vast cultural and political divides. In a world often driven by grand declarations and overt displays of power, tea offered a subtle, yet profoundly effective, means of influencing outcomes. It was the quiet anchor in the stormy seas of international politics, providing a moment of serene clarity when it was needed most. Having explored tea's fascinating journey through trade, society, and even diplomacy, we now delve into its most profound impact, the calming influence it exerted on the Persian soul. This is where the subtle rituals truly blossom, transforming a simple beverage into a profound source of psychological and spiritual solace. Imagine the world outside, with its clamor and demands, fading into a gentle hum as you hold a warm estecan, feeling the quiet seep into your bones. In a culture that deeply valued introspection, poetry, and philosophy, tea offered a perfect companion for contemplation. The very act of preparing and consuming tea is inherently meditative. The slow boiling of water, the unfolding of the leaves, the gentle steam rising from the cup, the deliberate sips, each step encourages mindfulness, pulling your attention away from external distractions and towards the quiet present. You're invited, almost compelled, to slow down, to breathe, to simply be. This wasn't a fast food culture, it was a slow food, slow life philosophy embodied in a cup. A mainstream historical fact is that many ancient and traditional cultures developed rituals around food and drink as a means of fostering community, spiritual connection, and individual well-being. In Persia, tea became one of the most accessible and pervasive of these rituals, offering a daily anchor in a world that, despite its poetic beauty, could also be challenging and unpredictable. It provided a consistent moment of predictable comfort, a reliable pause in the rhythm of life. Now, for a quirky tidbit, it's said that some Persians would deliberately choose specific times of day, or even specific quiet corners of their homes, or chaykhanes, to engage in their tea ritual. This wasn't about avoiding others, but about maximizing the calming effect, creating a personal sanctuary for reflection. Imagine a scholar retreating to a sunlit alcove with his books and a perpetually warm samovar, finding a deeper focus, a more profound understanding, simply because his mind was calm and unburdened by external noise. It's a bit like someone today finding their perfect Zen spot for meditation or yoga, but their chosen tool for inner peace was a simple glass of tea. Historians still argue whether tea's calming effect was primarily due to its mild stimulant properties, the gentle lift of caffeine without the jitters of coffee, the ritualistic nature of its preparation and consumption, or the social context of communal enjoyment. Was it chemistry, ceremony, or camaraderie that truly brought the calm? It's likely a synergistic effect, where each element contributed to the overall sense of peace and well-being. The gentle buzz of the caffeine, combined with the reassuring rhythm of the ritual and the comforting presence of others, created a powerful balm for the soul. The psychological impact of tea drinking cannot be overstated. In times of stress or sorrow, a warm cup of tea offered solace, a tangible expression of care from a loved one. In moments of joy, it elevated the celebratory mood, adding a layer of sophisticated comfort. It became a silent confidant, a steady presence through life's highs and lows. The act of offering tea to a troubled friend, or accepting a cup from a compassionate host, was often more comforting than words, conveying empathy and support through a simple, yet profound, gesture. You didn't need to explain yourself. The tea understood. Moreover, the chai khanes, as public spaces, offered a refuge from the pressures of daily life. For the common person, tired after a day's labor, or for the merchant weary from haggling, the tea house provided an oasis of tranquility. Here, amidst the gentle chatter and the comforting aromas, one could unwind, clear the mind, and simply be. The tea itself facilitated this state, offering a gentle energy that sustained conversation without agitation, and a warmth that soothed both body and spirit. It was the perfect antidote to the hustle and bustle, a reminder that peace could be found in the simplest of pleasures. The spiritual dimension is also worth considering. While not overtly religious, the mindful consumption of tea aligns perfectly with the contemplative aspects of Persian Sufism and other spiritual practices that emphasize presence and inner peace. The focus required to appreciate the nuances of the tea, to feel its warmth and taste its subtle flavors, can be seen as a form of meditation, a pathway to greater awareness. It's about finding the sacred in the mundane, elevating a daily habit into a profound practice of self-care and spiritual nourishment. You're not just drinking, you're connecting. Quietly, gently, with something deeper, from the profound calming influence it exerted. We now transition to how the traditions of Persian tea have endured and evolved into modern Persian tea culture. It's not merely a relic of the past, but a living, breathing custom, adapting to the rhythms of contemporary life while holding fast to its ancient soul. You can walk through the bustling streets of Tehran today, or a quiet village in Azerbaijan, and find the aroma of tea still permeating the air, a comforting constant amidst the whirl of modernity. Despite centuries of political shifts, social changes, and technological advancements, the fundamental act of drinking tea remains deeply ingrained in Iranian society as Persia is now known. The samovar, though perhaps electric rather than coal-fired, still holds pride of place in many homes and public establishments. The Estacan might be mass-produced, but its delicate form and the ritual of cradling it in your hand persist. This continuity speaks volumes about the enduring power of the tea ritual, its ability to transcend fleeting trends and offer a timeless source of comfort. A mainstream historical fact is that Iran's deep cultural identity has often allowed it to preserve ancient customs even amidst significant external influences and internal transformations. Tea, having become so intrinsically woven into the fabric of daily life, was resilient enough to withstand the tides of change. It wasn't simply a foreign import that could be easily discarded. It had become a part of what it meant to be Persian. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while traditionally black tea reigned supreme, modern Iran has seen a subtle diversification of tea preferences, with some younger generations exploring green teas or even herbal infusions. However, even these newer choices are often prepared and served with the same reverence for ritual and hospitality that characterizes traditional black tea consumption. It's a bit like seeing a classic car enthusiast lovingly restoring a vintage vehicle, but perhaps with a modern, more efficient engine under the hood. The core tradition adapts, but the spirit remains. You might even find a trendy cafe in North Tehran serving up a Persian fusion tea, but the essence of the chai kane is still there. Historians still argue whether the remarkable persistence of traditional tea rituals in modern Iran is a testament to the strength of cultural inertia, a conscious effort to preserve national identity, or simply the inherent appeal of a comforting and accessible beverage. Is it stubborn tradition, patriotic duty, or universal pleasure? It's likely a combination, where the familiarity and ease of the ritual, coupled with its deep cultural resonance, ensure its continued prevalence. The chai kane, while facing competition from modern coffee shops and fast food establishments, continues to thrive, albeit in perhaps more varied forms. You'll find traditional ones, meticulously preserved, offering an authentic glimpse into the past. But you'll also find more contemporary versions, blending traditional aesthetics with modern comforts, appealing to a younger demographic. These spaces remain vital social hubs, places where friends gather, families connect, and business deals are still informally sealed over steaming cups. The conversation might be about cryptocurrency instead of camel trade, but the tea flows just the same. In homes, the invitation to have some tea remains the quintessential expression of hospitality. No guest is allowed to leave without at least one glass of tea, often accompanied by fresh dates, nabat, or sweet pastries. This act of offering tea is a silent language of welcome, a profound gesture of friendship and respect that transcends verbal communication. It's a bridge between generations, a common denominator that instantly puts people at ease. You arrive, perhaps a little tired or flustered, and the first thing you're offered is that warm, comforting glass. And suddenly, everything feels a little bit better. Furthermore, tea plays a significant role in various social occasions, from informal visits to formal celebrations. It's present at weddings, mourning ceremonies, and festive gatherings. Its quiet presence grounds these events, offering a moment of shared reflection or joyous camaraderie. Depending on the occasion, it serves as a gentle anchor, a reminder of continuity and shared heritage amidst the changing tides of modern life. The widespread availability of different tea varieties from across the globe also means that modern Persian tea drinkers have more choice than their ancestors. Yet, the classic strong black tea, often referred to as Ceylon tea, regardless of its actual origin, remains the undisputed favorite. It's the familiar taste, the comforting aroma, the embodiment of home. The subtle rituals persist not out of obligation, but out of a genuine love for the peace and connection that tea unfailingly provides. A quiet testament to a tradition that continues to soothe the soul, one perfectly steeped glass at a time. Having explored tea's remarkable persistence in modern Persian life, let's now shift our focus to a more practical, yet equally fascinating aspect: the economic and agricultural dimensions of tea in Persia. It's not just about the comforting sip, it's about the vast network of cultivation, trade, and industry that supports this deep-rooted cultural habit. Imagine the sprawling, emerald green tea plantations nestled against the Caspian Sea, or the bustling port cities where ships once unloaded precious cargo, all contributing to the silent hum of the tea economy. While tea initially arrived as an imported luxury from China and India, Persia eventually sought to cultivate its own tea to reduce reliance on foreign supply and to bolster its agricultural economy. This strategic shift wasn't easy. Tea cultivation is notoriously sensitive to climate and soil conditions. However, a particular region in northern Iran, along the lush, rainy shores of the Caspian Sea, proved to be remarkably suitable. The provinces of Gilan and Mazandaran, with their high humidity, abundant rainfall, and fertile soil, became the heartland of Iranian tea production. A mainstream historical fact is that the first significant efforts to cultivate tea in Iran began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, notably spearheaded by Prince Mohammad Mirza, also known as Kashef al-Sultane, who is often hailed as the father of Iranian tea. He clandestinely brought tea saplings and seeds from India, risking the wrath of British colonial authorities who closely guarded their tea industry. His dedication laid the groundwork for a domestic tea industry, transforming parts of northern Iran into a vibrant tea-growing region. This was a deliberate act of economic self-sufficiency, a quiet rebellion against reliance on imports. Now, for a quirky tidbit, Kashef al-Sultane reportedly initially disguised himself as a French laborer to gain access to Indian tea plantations, learning the secrets of cultivation and processing firsthand. Imagine the sheer audacity and cunning required for such an endeavor. This clandestine mission highlights the immense value placed on tea, not just as a beverage, but as a strategic commodity that could impact national economy and even sovereignty. It's a story worthy of a spy thriller. But instead of blueprints for a superweapon, he was smuggling tiny tea plants. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for establishing a domestic tea industry was purely economic to save foreign exchange, political to reduce dependence on foreign powers, or a blend of both, fueled by a growing nationalistic sentiment. Was it profit, power, or pride that drove this agricultural revolution? It was likely a complex interplay, demonstrating how a cultural preference could lead to significant national investment and strategic planning. The development of the tea industry in Iran created new economic opportunities for thousands. Tea farms provided livelihoods for countless families in the northern provinces. Shifted agricultural focus from traditional crops to this lucrative new commodity. Tea factories, processing the freshly picked leaves, sprang up, creating employment in manufacturing. The entire supply chain, from cultivation to drying, processing, packaging, and distribution, became a significant sector of the Iranian economy. This was not merely about tea drinking, it was about nation building through agriculture and industry. Furthermore, the economic impact extended beyond direct production. The transport networks, roads, railways, and eventually trucks benefited from the need to move tea from the Caspian region to markets across the country. The tea trade also fostered ancillary industries, such as the production of packaging materials, samovars, and estacans, creating a ripple effect throughout the economy. It was a catalyst for broader economic development, demonstrating how a seemingly simple cultural habit could drive complex industrial growth. Despite domestic production, Iran continues to import a significant amount of tea, primarily from India, Sri Lanka, Ceylon, and Kenya. This is due to the sheer volume of tea consumed by the population, which far outstrips domestic supply. However, Iranian-grown tea is highly prized for its unique flavor profile, often described as robust and full-bodied, and is increasingly sought after by connoisseurs. The balance between domestic production and imports reflects a dynamic market, constantly striving to meet the insatiable national thirst for tea. The green fields of Gilan, therefore, represent not just picturesque landscapes, but the economic heartbeat of a nation's beloved ritual. A testament to how the humble leaf can power an entire industry. Having explored the economic engine that drives tea production in Persia, let's now turn our attention to an equally compelling aspect: tea's perceived health benefits, both ancient beliefs and modern understanding. For centuries, long before scientific studies and double-blind trials, tea was cherished not just for its taste or its calming effects, but for its purported medicinal properties. Imagine an ancient Persian physician meticulously observing these effects of various herbs, recognizing the subtle restorative power of this brewed leaf. In ancient Persia, as in many traditional societies, the line between food, beverage, and medicine was often blurred. Herbs, spices, and natural infusions were frequently used to treat ailments, promote well-being, and maintain balance within the body. When tea arrived from the East, It was often introduced with narratives of its medicinal virtues, having been used for millennia in China as a health tonic. It was naturally assimilated into the existing framework of traditional Persian medicine, or tib. A mainstream historical fact is that traditional Persian medicine, heavily influenced by Greek, Roman, and Indian medical systems, emphasized the concept of balancing the body's humors and promoting holistic well-being. Ingredients were often categorized by their hot or cold properties and prescribed accordingly. Tea, with its warming and stimulating qualities, would have been seen as beneficial for certain conditions, particularly those associated with coldness or sluggishness. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some early Persian texts or oral traditions might have attributed almost mystical healing powers to tea, perhaps suggesting it could ward off evil spirits or enhance longevity. Beyond its more prosaic physical effects, imagine a weary traveler on the Silk Road, convinced that a cup of tea not only quenched his thirst, but also protected him from the desert's unseen dangers. While these beliefs might seem unscientific today, they underscore the profound faith people placed in this remarkable beverage and its ability to offer solace and perceived protection. Historians still argue whether tea's initial acceptance as a health tonic in Persia was primarily due to imported beliefs from its lands of origin, its genuine physiological effects, or simply a cultural inclination to assign beneficial properties to pleasant consumables. Was it ancient advertising, actual science, or wishful thinking? It was likely a blend, where the observed mild stimulation and comfort it provided supported and reinforced the imported medical lore. Fast forward to modern understanding, and many of the ancient intuitions about tea's benefits has been corroborated by scientific research. Black tea, the staple of Persian tea culture, is rich in antioxidants, particularly flavonoids, which are known to combat oxidative stress in the body. These compounds are linked to reduced risk of chronic diseases, including heart disease and certain cancers. So, that calming cup of tea is doing more than just relaxing your mind. It's actively working to protect your cells. Furthermore, tea contains L-theanine, an amino acid that has a unique effect on the brain. Unlike the often jittery stimulation from coffee, L-theanine promotes a state of relaxed alertness. It can improve focus and attention while simultaneously inducing a sense of calm and reducing anxiety. This perfectly aligns with the historical observation of tea's calming influence on the soul, providing mental clarity without overstimulation. You're not just getting a caffeine kick, you're getting a gentle mental massage. The mild caffeine content in tea provides a gentle boost, helping to ward off fatigue and improve cognitive function. Makes it an ideal companion for long hours of study, conversation, or work, without the sometimes overwhelming rush of stronger stimulants. And let's not forget the simple act of hydration. Drinking tea contributes to overall fluid intake, which is essential for bodily functions, especially in hotter climates. For centuries, tea provided a safe and often boiled source of hydration, reducing the risk of waterborne illnesses. Even the ritualistic aspect of tea consumption itself contributes to well-being. The deliberate pause, the focus on the senses smell, taste, warmth, and the communal aspect of sharing tea can reduce stress and foster social connection, both of which are critical for mental and emotional health. So, whether it was the ancient belief in its warming properties or modern understanding of its antioxidants and L-theanine, tea has consistently offered more than just refreshment. It's a gentle prescription for body and soul, a quiet testament to a plant that truly does offer a subtle path to vitality and peace. The quiet gurgle of the samovar, then, isn't just boiling water, it's brewing well-being. We arrive now at the culmination of our journey, tracing the unassuming path of tea from distant lands to the very heart of Persian life. This final section reflects on the enduring cultural significance of tea in Persian identity, a legacy far grander than mere agriculture or fleeting health fads. It's about how a simple dried leaf, steeped in hot water, became a silent thread weaving through centuries of history, connecting generations, and profoundly shaping a people. You're now looking back, surveying the vast tapestry of a culture where tea is not just consumed, but celebrated, revered, and deeply understood. Tea, or chai as it's known in Persia, is more than just a national beverage. It's a fundamental pillar of hospitality, a cornerstone of social interaction, and a symbol of domestic tranquility. It embodies the essence of Mehman Navazi, the deep-seated Persian tradition of welcoming guests with warmth and generosity. The first thing offered to any visitor, regardless of the hour or circumstance, is almost always tea. This simple act immediately establishes a bond, breaking down barriers and creating an atmosphere of comfort and ease. You can feel the warmth of that welcome, the quiet reassurance that you are among friends. A mainstream historical fact is that hospitality has been a cardinal virtue in Persian culture for millennia, deeply rooted in ancient traditions and religious teachings. Tea, arriving relatively late in this long history, seamlessly integrated into this existing framework, becoming perhaps the most accessible and universal expression of this profound cultural value. It became the liquid embodiment of welcome, a nonverbal assurance of goodwill. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the phrase, "let's have some chai," in Persian often means much more than just drinking tea. It can be an invitation to converse, to solve a problem, to share news, or simply to spend time together. It implies a pause, a moment of connection, and a commitment to slowing down. It's a bit like saying, "let's catch up," in English, but with the added promise of a warm, comforting ritual. The tea itself is the catalyst, but the true purpose is the human interaction it facilitates. It's a linguistic shortcut to intimacy and shared time. Historians still argue whether tea's profound cultural entrenchment was a unique Persian phenomenon, or if it mirrored similar cultural adoptions in other societies that embraced tea, like Japan or Britain. Was there something inherently Persian that allowed tea to sink so deeply into its identity? Or was it simply a common human response to a comforting beverage? It's likely that while universal human needs for comfort and connection played a role, the existing Persian cultural emphasis on hospitality, contemplation, and social ritual created a uniquely fertile ground for tea to flourish and become so deeply emblematic. The legacy of the leaf extends to the very rhythm of daily life. From the early morning brew that awakens the household to the late-night cups shared under the stars, tea marks the passage of time. It punctuates conversations, provides comfort during moments of solitude, and acts as a silent witness to countless stories, whispered secrets, and boisterous celebrations. It is the background hum of life, the constant presence that reassures and grounds, even in modern, fast-paced Iranian cities. The chai khane, in its traditional or contemporary form, remains a vital institution. It's a testament to the enduring need for communal spaces where people can slow down, disconnect from digital distractions, and simply enjoy the company of others. In a world increasingly driven by speed and efficiency, the tea house offers a quiet rebellion, a space where the clock seems to tick a little slower, and conversations unfold at their own leisurely pace. The rituals surrounding tea, passed down through generations, are not rigid rules, but cherished traditions. They are taught subtly, through observation and participation, cementing a sense of shared heritage and continuity. From the youngest child learning to offer estekan to guests, to the eldest family member presiding over the samovar, each individual plays a role in perpetuating this cultural legacy. It's a beautiful, living chain of tradition, linked by the simple act of brewing and sharing tea. In essence, tea in Persia has transcended its physical form to become an intangible cultural heritage. It embodies patience, hospitality, contemplation, and community. It is a symbol of resilience, adapting to new eras while holding firm to its core values. The subtle rituals of Persian tea drinkers, therefore, aren't just about a beverage. They are about a way of life, a philosophy woven into every sip, offering a continuous, gentle reminder to slow down, connect, and find peace in the smallest of moments. It is the comforting taste of home, of history, and of the enduring Persian soul.